Okay, hello everyone. My name is Kevin Kotz, and I'll be your instructor for History 337, the Roman Republic. I've given you dates here, but we'll actually start the course a little bit before 509 BC, but 509 BC is the traditional date for the Roman Republic, and then we'll go through the first emperor Augustus and slightly after because I've always had a love of the ancient towns of Pompeii and Herculaneum, and so I want to kind of add some extra information into our class about these towns as they grow along with the Roman Republic. Okay, so who am I? Now, clearly this image has been generated by AI. In fact, I put it into Copilot, which is the Microsoft version of AI. I was taking a course this summer, actually I took a few courses on AI in the classroom, and they wanted us to generate a photo. So I thought I would do double duty since I knew I was teaching Roman Republic, and I just asked it to create a photo of myself, which I uploaded, and make myself into a Roman reading a scroll. And this is what it generated. Anyway, so I started off with a BS in biological anthropology at the University of Michigan quite a while ago. And I started working in a neurology lab at the University of Michigan and loved running a lab, doing experiments and so on. But it wasn't what I wanted to ultimately do. So I went back to the university and did a BA in religious studies at the University of Michigan. And then after that, I did an MA at Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union, and it was in Greek and Hebrew, which is essentially a history degree, but with the languages thrown in. And then I decided to do my PhD at Macquarie University, which is in Sydney, Australia. Fantastic place to go to if you want to study ancient history because everything you could study. I mean, my area was Roman history, and in particular, it was early Christianity in the 300s AD. Okay, so I do have a physical office on campus, and I am there every once in a while. It's SF 436. I know we're an asynchronous course, so I don't expect students to pop into my office, but if you do want to meet, let me know, and I can see if I can meet you either at my office or on campus somewhere. I will have office hours online. It will be on the syllabus. It'll be through Zoom. And again, if you want to meet me on campus, we can certainly do that. If you want to meet by office hours on Zoom, just let me know of a time and I will make it work. And then I've given you my email, which is also on the syllabus, just kevin.kotz@csueastbay.edu. Okay, I do want to give you a bit of an overview of the course because I tend to write very long syllabi, as you can tell. This one's probably 22 pages, but I feel like I want to make it crystal clear what you are getting into in the course, and it actually reduces some of the questions that you might have throughout the course about what we're doing. This is a photo of the Roman Forum that I took a number of years ago when I was there. If you've ever been to Rome, make sure you do not skip this particular area. It's pretty incredible what the archaeologists have discovered and still discovering. Okay, so I want to start off and I'm not going to read these. These are our student learning outcomes. So every course you take should have student learning outcomes, and these are what you would be learning in the course over the course of the semester. So, and these are ones that I developed for the course, and you can read through, and we will be doing all of these things. So, utilize basic concepts for assembling, organizing, and so on. Digital tools, we'll be using podcasts and making videos. We will be thinking about how the ancient world is related to the modern world because that's really important. You don't want to take an ancient history course and not think about how it compares to what our civilization looks like today. You'll be doing some writing, which I'll talk about in just a bit. And then we're also going to be talking a little bit about sustainability, migration, diversity in the Roman Republic. And again, as I stated in the very beginning, we're going to be taking a special focus look at Pompeii and Herculaneum. Okay, this course is a general education course. And I want to talk about this a little because for the past 4 years, I have been the director of general education here at East Bay. So GE is kind of close to my heart. And these are the upper division 3 or humanities learning outcomes. And again, this course will be covering these things. I'm not going to read them, but you should be familiar with these as we go along through the course. You'll see that you hopefully will be achieving these by the end of the semester. Okay, we do have a few required readings, and again, they are on the syllabus, and I've put the date of when you should have read these by and the page numbers. So I have an extremely small, short book. I've got it sitting here. You can see it's fairly small. This is David Gwynn's The Roman Republic, a very short introduction. And it's fairly cheap in terms of textbooks, and it's one of the reasons why I chose it, but it's short and sweet. Now, there are lots of other really interesting books that I could have, sorry, I'm reaching, I probably shouldn't be reaching for books as I'm talking, but some really good ones on the Roman Republic that are fairly thick and dense, and I thought that, we'll go through the material in the lectures. The textbook can just be kind of a extra material when you read it. We're also going to be reading a really fascinating book by Mary Beard. Oops, let me see if maybe that won't show up on the camera. Anyway, it's called The Fires of Vesuvius, Pompeii Lost and Found. Mary Beard is one of the most famous Roman historians in the world right now. If you search for her, like on YouTube, or not, actually YouTube, Netflix, and things, her name will continually pop up with documentaries on the Roman period. She writes about the Roman period as well as others, and her style is really fun to read. It's not kind of academic language. It can be, some of her books are, but this is a very conversational book, and it's really fantastic. So we'll be reading through that. I do have various articles that look at very specific topics. So books can be very general information. The articles will be very specific. So for example, one week we're going to look at the grain supply economy in the Roman Republic. So they're very specific. We also have a text called primary texts, and these are written during the time period we're studying. Usually, there's a caveat here because a lot of the history we know from the early Roman Republic was written hundreds of years after, but it's still considered to be primary text. I should have put, we'll also be looking at archaeology, which is considered to be a primary source. So primary sources are texts as well as archaeology in this course. Okay, we will be using AI. I know it's very controversial still about using AI in the classroom and how it's being used, who's using it, and so on. I do have a lecture just after this about the use of AI in our classroom, so make sure that you look at that. So we will be using Gemini LM here. I went to a talk in May, and it wasn't necessarily about AI in the classroom, but I went to a bunch of lectures on it and learned about Notebook LM, which was the previous name for this. And it's really fantastic. It's sort of an enclosed AI program where I will upload the sources we'll be using, and then it will generate flashcards, quizzes, practice quizzes, not the actual quizzes you'll be using in class because I will be creating those. But we'll use it as a study feature, and we'll also be using it for some primary source analysis just to test all this out. But be sure to read my AI statement because I have quite a long statement that I developed this summer on what I think about AI and how we'll be using it in class. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the assignments we'll be having. So I don't believe in giving just a midterm final and an essay in a course because I don't think it's fair, especially if you fail, say, the midterm exam, you've essentially failed the entire course. So I've created a bunch of assignments. Some are slightly larger, some are pretty small, with the main assignment being a team website. So again, we're an asynchronous course, but sometimes I've noticed that students feel lost in an asynchronous course. So they don't feel very connected. So I usually have my students create a team website and they work on it as a team. Now, individually, you'll be writing 3 essays on various topics throughout the semester, and then you will be creating videos based off these research essays. So I'm hoping you find this very useful. So I'm kind of expecting you to come out of this class knowing a little bit about the Roman Republic, but knowing how to make podcasts and videos, and to do various things on AI. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm having you write small research essays and then turning them into videos. There will be 3 quizzes. I don't give a midterm and I don't give a final exam. If you look at the syllabus, you'll see when these are. Um, these will be essentially short answer exams. I haven't quite decided how I'll do that just yet. We will have a number of discussion boards, and if you've looked at the syllabus, you'll see that the what I will be doing is we'll have a discussion board on primary text or archaeology, and then the next assignment for a discussion board will be done through Gemini LM, the AI that we'll be using in this class, where you'll be comparing what you've done in terms of the discussion topic and what AI has done, and then doing some comparisons. And then at the very end, you'll write a short essay on the use of AI in this course, because I'll be really interested in how you feel about that, and then we'll take a poll. So that's essentially it for assignments. And when you look at the syllabus, you will see that I set this up almost each week in a very specific way. So I have these topics called Watch, where I've created the various lectures. Sometimes we'll have one, sometimes we'll have two. Usually at the beginning of the semester, the first week, I'll have more than that, but they're usually fairly short. I'll have a do section, like do your quiz or do your essay. I'll have a read section with all the required readings for the course. I'll have a think about, meaning say in week 6, and I'm just pulling this off the top of my head, we will think about working on your video essay number 2, and then prepare for, which is essentially the same idea. I want to start thinking about certain things. Okay, now that was kind of an overview of the course. Now, I will say we will be looking at the Roman Republic through really the before the Republic was even thought about, and focusing on Herculaneum and Pompeii, the 2 most famous courses, most famous towns in ancient history, because they were buried by volcanic eruption, and quite a bit of those 2 societies have survived. So I want to really focus on that. But it's also important to think about what history is and how it's created. So I just have 3 slides here, and we might be looking at this more closely throughout the course, because if you haven't taken a history course, it's probably good to know how history is put together, and how you will be thinking about putting it together, because that's essentially what you'll be doing. So I've already mentioned the idea of a primary source. So it's anything that's written during the time period of the Roman Republic. Now, that can be an issue, as I've already mentioned, because some of the earliest things, especially about the founding, the date, the 509 BC, we don't have writing from that period. Oh, actually, that's not true. We do have at least one inscription. But in general, we don't know what happened there, because we're reliant on historians who are Roman, wrote hundreds of years after their sort of origin story. But it's still considered a primary source. Now, secondary source is anything written after the Roman Republic. So the 2 textbooks I have you read by Gwen and by Mary Beard, those are secondary sources. The articles are secondary sources, and so on. And this lecture is a secondary source on the Roman Republic. Okay, so what are these sources? So when we finally get them, they're pretty interesting. So as I mentioned before, no written history before 600 BC. It really started around 200 BC, and we'll talk about this a little. What's interesting is some of these later historians copy and paste from earlier histories that we don't have. So someone will say, oh, Dionysius of Halicarnassus wrote this in his book, and a later historian will quote that. So we kind of have a mix of things. We do have papyri, or wooden tablets. So papyri is a plant that grows in Egypt. It's long and thin. You can see them growing in gardens around the Bay Area as well. The stem is sort of split, and then it's hammered together, and it makes kind of like a piece of paper, which is where our word paper comes from, papyri. Wooden tablets, just what they are. People will write sometimes on wax, sometimes they'll just carve into wooden tablet. We have inscriptions that are normally carved in stone, not always. They can be written on various materials. We'll look at some sources from Pompeii and Herculaneum, or Pompeii in particular, with quite a few inscriptions where people will write on the walls. They'll write graffiti, they'll write election news or election pleas. We've got coins, which can tell us quite a bit about history, especially the images that are stamped on both sides of the coins. You can also look at the metal that the coin is made out of for a bit of history. And of course, we have archaeology, which kind of covers all of those little bits. But archaeology, it's, the buildings, the human remains, and so on. So those are the main sources of Roman history. Now, what can they tell us? Sometimes not a lot. So being a historian or being a student taking a history class, you have to look at these and use your kind of best guess about what they actually mean and what they can tell us, which for me is kind of the exciting thing about history. Okay, and in this last slide, I just want to introduce you to a few other things. So historiography is really the study of the writing of history. We're not going to talk about it too much in this class, but you might see this word thrown around every once in a while, especially towards the bibliography, like what is a historiography and so on. If you're a history major, and I know there's a few of you out there in this class, you will be taking a course specifically on historiography. So what is history? That is a big question. I've been doing history for quite a while, and I don't know if I have a specific answer of that, but it's like what happened in the past, who did it, sort of the who, what, why, that where, and when that you kind of learned in middle school and in high school. History is kind of the explanation of what happened. It's kind of our best guess. Now, a really important question, or two questions really to think about, is can what happened in the past truly be known? I have my views on that. I'm not so certain we can, because we don't have all the information. We don't have recordings of what people said, how they lived, and so on. But we do have various evidences, which I talked about before. And your job as a historian is to put that together to give a best guess about what happened. And if it can't be known, like I just said, then what is history? Well, it is your best guess, but based on evidence. You have to be using evidence. You can't just say, oh, I think so-and-so did this, without having a bit of evidence to back you up. Anyway, that's kind of an overview of the class. And in the next lecture, I will be talking about some of the prehistory that happened in the area that started the Roman Republic.